Hello everyone. Hopefully the sound's a bit better this time, and hopefully the starting off sideways issue has been sorted out as well. So any problems, put them in the comments section, but hopefully it will be working a bit better this time. I've already got a few questions in because there was some left over from last time, and there was a few put on the announcement post when I said about this one today. But actually, the one I thought I would start with, D. Rizzle says, I have a question. In the early days of stopping drinking, what do you do to counteract the triggers in your head? I understand that it's a poison, etc., but I still struggle to prevent the spiral of craving when those triggers hit. And I think this ties in as well because it was something I wanted to speak about, because there was a post on today about someone who basically said that she'd drunk today. It all got a bit too much, and I think she said something along the lines of she just totally disregarded all her tools, everything, and just went for it. And I think it's quite useful to run through something here dealing with cravings. Is that I once heard that a human being can only think of 7 things at once. Now, I have no idea if that's true or not, but I think what you can agree with is that there's a finite number of things you can think of at any one time. So in a split second in your head, there's a certain number of things you can be thinking of. Personally, 7 sounds a bit too many to me. I'm probably capable of about 3 or 4 at best. But I think what you need to bear in mind is when you're going through the spiral of craving, when you're craving something, it tends to get into a bit of a panic. And so let's take a simple example. So say you've had a bad day at work or something. The things that are going through your head are probably, I've had a bad day at work, I'm miserable, do you know what, I just deserve a drink, or something even more basic like I just don't care, I just want to have a drink. You're thinking about how I could drink tonight and stop tomorrow, maybe this time I can moderate. If you think about it, if you've got all those things going around in your head, you've already got 7 things there. What you need to bear in mind is when you make decisions, even if it feels irrational, it isn't. You are making a decision based on the information you've got before you at that time, okay? But you only have the capacity to think of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things, whatever, at one time. Okay, this is what people say when they refer to as I hit the fuck it button, basically. It's almost a panic situation. If you think about making a decision as a pair of scales, okay, so you've got the pro drinking and the not drinking on the scales, but remember you've only got 7 slots. So if you start to get into a panic and you're thinking, yes, but I'm miserable and I just want to have a drink, I've had an argument with my husband, wife, partner, it's their fault, I can moderate this time, I miss it, I'm miserable without it. All of those things, when you fill your head up with those, all you're thinking about is reasons to drink, and the reasons not to drink are completely gone out of your head. So the first and most important thing to do with craving is it's almost like a panic thing, and you need to stop and take a breath, metaphorically if not physically. Because a lot of the time, what actually happens is you then take the drink, then everything's calm because you haven't got that panic situation, and that's the moment where you think, oh, hang on, but what about the hangover? And what about the fact that I'm not actually enjoying this anyway? And I realised this last time I slipped up. So what you need to do, the first thing when you're craving is just to take a breath, metaphorically, stop for a minute and approach it a lot more calmly. I spoke about it last week as well, but I think the main thing is with craving, the craving comes about because you want a drink, you fantasize about it. And in fact, I found a really good quote today. It wasn't even in Quitlet, it was just a novel I'm reading at the moment. Nostalgia is predicated on something that never existed. We imagine an Arcadia in the past. Isn't that brilliant? When you're thinking about drinking, you have this idolised fantasy about it. So let's go back to the example, you've had an argument with your partner or something, or a bad day at work. You start to get it into your head that a drink will take it all away. It doesn't. And I'm not talking about the next day when you have the hangover. I'm talking about actually when you're taking the drink. It doesn't do anything apart from make you feel slightly dulled. It doesn't take away the bad day or the argument or anything. And that's what you need to get into your head. You need to separate the reality from the idea, the nostalgia, that sort of idea, that idealised fantasy of drinking. They're two completely separate things. So when you're in a craving situation, don't get sucked into it. Calm yourself down and think rationally. Bring in all the factors at once. And a lot of the time, that's the best way of getting rid of it. I'll just see if I've got quite a few questions left over from the last one, but I'll just see if we've got any questions. Sorry, so having to scroll through. So I think Sally Gordon, hello Sally. I struggled all the way back from uni today, told myself everything, but I've had a drink tonight now. I tried everything to stop me. I don't drink every night or every week, but I just got a new job, so I thought I needed to celebrate even though I'm alone doing it. I think you're in an ideal situation if you're drinking alone to really analyse it. Okay, so you've got a new job, it's something to celebrate. So honestly, are you feeling happier for having that drink or not? Is it really making you feel fantastic or isn't it? I mean, certainly I can't talk about how you feel, but for me, and going back to the craving thing, it was always the idea and not the reality of the drink that was the thing that was dragging me in. And I quite often found when I actually took that drink, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So Lynn Johnson, that's the big test now, not to drink when we are out eating, drinking all the time. Do I tell them what I'm... Sorry, it's jumping around a bit here. Do I tell them what I'm doing? So for me, quite a lot of the time, I don't particularly like being the centre of attention when we're out socialising. So I generally say I'm not drinking. And if somebody asks why, I just say I don't really feel like it, because that just cuts the conversation dead. I think the problem is people will try and force you to drink. And I think if you say I'm detoxing, they go, oh, go on, have a drink. You can detox again tomorrow. Or if you say I'm going for a run in the morning, oh, don't worry, you can have a line and do your run another day. But actually, if you think about it, if you just turn around to them and say, I just don't fancy drinking tonight, there's very little they can say to that. I mean, if you want to, you can tell them you've quit drinking, you're no longer interested in it anymore. But it really depends on how much attention you want to draw to it. And I like to close the conversation down as quickly as possible. And I found the best way of doing that is just to say, I don't fancy drinking tonight. The other one's driving, of course. That's another good one. Although, again, people will start telling you to get a taxi or something. So for me, I think the easiest way of doing it is just to say you don't fancy drinking tonight. Just seeing if we've got any more. Why does it seem so much harder to quit the second time around? I had a long period of sobriety, but haven't been able to do it again. That's something a lot of people find. It is harder to stop the second time round. I think there's a few factors at play there. One, I think you need to bear in mind, and again it goes back to talking about nostalgia and fading effect bias and seeing things that happened in the past far more positively than they actually were. And I think firstly, stopping the first time around probably wasn't that easy. You probably look back on it and think it is, but don't forget there's a momentum thing with stopping drinking. It's like sort of, the old cars, we get to crank them to get them going, and when they get going, they're off. And that's why people have a lot of day ones, a lot of day twos, a lot of day threes, and then for a lot of people, hopefully it catches on and it sort of picks up a bit of its own momentum. So when you finally hit that momentum, it feels a lot easier. But I suspect for most of us, it wasn't that easy to begin with. And you have this idea that, it was really easy the first time around, where it probably wasn't. And you're probably in much the same situation that you were before. But it all comes down to just getting that momentum, getting that first few days under your belt. Because I think the key with the first few days is that mental chemical imbalance that caused by the drinking starts to dissipate. So you feel a lot mentally stronger. You start to sleep properly, and you feel hugely better when you get through that period. And that's really where you're aiming to get to, because that's when it hopefully starts to get better. So hopefully that's helped slightly there. To see if we've got any other questions. If not, I'll go back to the ones after the last time. So I've dealt with the one on counteracting the triggers. So someone has asked, dealing with drinking friends and creating a new social life. They're the two questions. So I think dealing with drinking friends, it's a very personal thing. As I say, I a lot of the time just say to people that I just don't fancy drinking tonight, because it cuts the conversation dead. That's usually with people sort of not close friends. I mean, all my close friends obviously know I don't drink anymore now. What I would say to them, I would always make it perfectly clear before you go out with them, because it just saves a lot of conversation. So when you're meeting, just tell them you don't drink anymore, because that puts a marker down. And I think a very important thing, don't try and match them drink for drink, because I've met someone the other day who'd read the book, and he's very happy to stop drinking. He said he went out with a friend of his, and the thing he found most difficult was trying to drink something ridiculous like 8 pints of Beck's Blue. The only reason we drink a lot of alcohol is because of the alcohol in it, and as it wears off, it leaves an anxious, insecure feeling, so we want to drink more to get rid of it. Take the alcohol away, and there's no reason to drink 8 pints of anything. It will make you feel sick. Even if it's water, it's alcohol-free beer, whatever it is, your body's not designed to cope with that much liquid. So what I would say is, don't try and match drinkers drink for drink. Okay, if you're thirsty, drink, and if you're not, stop. You don't need to be throwing liquid down your throat all night long. And I think everyone sort of mentions this, and you'll find it yourself, but you will need to leave earlier than you normally do. So I was out at a work function recently, and it started sort of early. It was about 4:30, 5ish. And then the food came out after about an hour, and that tends to slow the effects of the alcohol down. But I think I'd been there about 3.5 hours, and I was starting to get irritated. People that I found interesting and good to talk to, after about 3.5 hours, become irritating because they've been drinking. They think they're a lot funnier than they are. They repeat themselves. They stand too close and talk too loudly. And that's the point, to just leave. Okay, and I think that's something you do need to be able to do, is just to basically say, I'm off now, and just go. So that is a key one for me. The social life's an interesting one, isn't it? Don't forget, when you're drinking a lot, you socialise with people who drink a lot. You do things that allow you to drink a lot, be it going to the pub or theatre or shows or whatever where they serve alcohol. But don't forget, there's a whole world out there of things you can do that don't involve drinking. I think I mentioned it last time, there's running clubs, swimming clubs, scuba diving clubs, there's book clubs, there's loads of things. So I think you just need to find what suits you, and develop a new set of friends if necessary, or do things with your old friends that don't require drinking all the time. Or if they are drinking, just say, okay, I'll meet them at 7, but start to aim to leave at 9 or 10 or something, rather than stay with them till 3 or 4 in the morning. Because as I say, it gets extremely painful. Did I lose a lot of friends when I stopped drinking? No, but it was a bit strange for me because we had young children at the time, and I think you stop seeing friends when you've got young children because you don't have the energy or the inclination or the time to go out. So my stopping drinking was kind of tied to that. So I really don't see a lot of my old friends. One of them now lives in Finland. One of them lived up north, so I don't see him anyway. So no, I think honestly the reason I stopped seeing my friends is more to do with having children. But I think what you do need to bear in mind is drugs alter your mind when you're taking them. Okay, if you've got 2 people taking a drug together, they're going to progress probably similarly and be in the same place mentally, so they can probably still communicate with each other. If you've got one person taking a drug and one isn't, they're going to be totally off in different mental spaces, and they're not going to communicate particularly well. And that's what happens with alcohol. Don't forget, it's not you stopping drinking that's caused that rift. It's them continuing to drink. Okay, if you took alcohol out of the equation, you'd still be friends with them. But if you've got friends who drink a lot, then you might start seeing a bit less of them. And I would suggest it's probably the same if a friend of yours started taking heroin and said, why don't you come round to my squat tonight? I'm going to be injecting heroin all night. You probably wouldn't fancy it either, would you? For me, that's sort of analogous to that. When you live in a holiday place, it's so difficult, particularly when friends say, but you don't drink a lot, you never have more than 2 wines, that won't hurt you, they say. Yeah, that's very true, but don't forget, it's your body and you do what you want with it. If someone, and again, that's why I think it's a good idea, I just don't fancy it. I don't really like it, I don't fancy it tonight, whatever it is, because you can't argue with that. The same if someone said you want a sausage roll and you said, I don't like them. What can they say? But please have one. It's just, I think you have to be a bit strong with things sometimes. Let's see if there's any more questions. Sean, hello Sean. I've reached a point now where I feel completely fine about saying I no longer drink when I'm asked why I don't want an alcoholic drink. If they have an issue with that, not my problem. Excellent, exactly. I think that demonstrates how quitting has helped me gain confidence, which is a far cry from my anxious self last year. Keep going, my sober friends. That's brilliant. Yeah, I think that's very true. I think it creates anxiety, and it creates that you just don't have that mental resilience. Whereas, personally, for me, I'm perfectly happy now to say I'm not drinking tonight. I don't want to. And I think a lot of it is probably in body language as well. I think if you're kind of looking down and I don't really fancy drinking tonight, people sense it and start sort of attacking you for it. But if you're kind of stood there quite confidently looking people in the eye and saying, I don't want to drink tonight, thank you, it's a bit more of a barrier for them. So I think that's brilliant. Let's see if we've got any more questions here. If not, so I'm trying to sort of look at them while I'm... So I think there was another one from previously. So that's the triggers one. Sorry, I'll just have a look and... This is an interesting one. Mary Bennett, she said, what are your thoughts on the way gender plays a role with addiction? I've gone back to reading a book from a very long time ago, written for women in relation to alcoholism in the family. So for me, I mean, for people who have read Alcohol Explained, it takes a fairly objective view of the whole thing. And I think it's like a lot of things, the closer you look at it, the more differences you see. But to give sort of an overview, very high level overview, for me, what alcohol does is it initially dulls you, okay, and then it creates a corresponding feeling of anxiety, which another drink then removes. So let's say, for example, you have a problem, whatever that might be, and let's say, for example, it's a childhood trauma of whatever it might be, and it preys on your mind throughout your life. When you drink, it dulls it slightly, okay, and when the drink wears off, it exaggerates it, it feels worse than it is. So if this is the problem, after a drink it goes to this, but when the drink wears off, it goes to that. So as you're drinking and negating it, and then the drink wears off and it gets worse, you start to have that mindset that the problem isn't this, which it really is, it's this, because when the drink wears off, it's this big overpowering thing you can't cope with. So you take the drink and then it becomes a bit more manageable. So you start to drink because of your perceived problems. Okay, and this is why I always say, a lot of people say if you want to stop drinking, you've got to look at the reason why you drink and sort that out before you do it. I say that's not the case at all. That's nonsense, because everyone has problems. And if you're waiting for your problems to go away before you stop drinking, you will be dead from alcoholism. As simple as that. You have to stop drinking first and then sort your problems out. But going back to it, everyone's drinks for that simple mechanism, or people who drink for emotional reasons and to drink for problems, problem drinkers who drink to negate their problems, that's the mechanics, okay? And I see that as applying to everyone, whether you're male, female, whatever country you're from, whatever your perceived problems. And I'm not saying I understand your problems. I was in an AA meeting once with a woman who, she had horrific burns all over her. She was out with her husband and 2 children and she was in a car crash. and she managed to get out the car, but the car was burning, and she was trying to get her husband and kids out, and she couldn't. She got horribly burnt trying to rescue them, and they burnt to death in front of her. Now, I can't in a million years imagine what she went through or how she even began to live a life after she'd done that. So I'm not saying I understand everyone's problems, but I understand the dynamic, how drinking appeared to assist. So, which is a very long way of saying, no, I don't think it's different for males and females. I've never been a female, so feel free to tell me I'm wrong. But I think probably generally males and females maybe have different problems, different issues, which I can't relate to or explain or try and talk you through those particular issues, but I see the issue of problem drinking working in the same dynamic to everyone. I'll see if there's anything else here. Rachel Molesley, I had to lock my purse in my office drawer and leave it behind when I came home from work to get those early days under my belt. Well, wow, at least it worked. So Joanne Deeks, I'm on day 2 but really need to stop. I'm starting a new job next week, which is for some reason a big trigger for me. Any tips for staying on the path when big things distract you? I mean, how do you stay true to the goal? Right, so a new job is quite a big thing, and I'm assuming you want to make the best of your job. Okay, if you drink, you are not going to be sleeping properly. Okay, you're going to be going into that new job probably at 50% of where you could actually be if you hadn't drunk. Okay, because don't forget the chemical imbalance. So if you're drinking the evening before and then you're going into work, you're going to have that additional anxiety. You're going to be nervous about a new job anyway. So what would be this much nervousness about a new job? With the alcohol is then going to be this much. You're going to be tired as well because you won't have slept properly because of the effect alcohol has on sleep. And it's going to be a nightmare. And then at the end of the day, the one thing you're going to want to do to get rid of all that anxiety is to drink again. So you're going to exacerbate the problem. So your new job nerves are going to last for weeks and weeks and weeks, and you're going to probably make a fairly poor impression on people, okay? Even if you were to go in and make a good impression, you're going to make twice as good an impression if you're not drinking. Because think about it, how are you going to do the best job? By being anxious and tired, or by being confident and well rested? Okay, that's all you need to think about. Think about I don't know what time you get up, but say you set the alarm for 6 or 7. Think of waking up at 3 in the morning, feeling anxious and tired and not being able to sleep, and then dozing off just before your alarm goes off, and that horrible feeling of having to drag yourself out of bed, feeling awful. And you will get that even if you just have one drink, because one drink will still ruin your sleep. So just keep that in mind. If you want to make the best shot of this job, then you don't drink. It really is that simple. I hope that's useful. So I've been drinking more moderately over the last 6 months, but want to resume alcohol-free as I know I'm happier and it's defo better than drinking regularly, but finding it hard to get started again. Any advice? I think that goes back to what we were talking about before, or what I was talking about before, about trying to stop the second time round is always a bit harder, and I think it's harder still if you are successfully moderating. And I say quote because the nature of it is it won't last. Moderation never does, and it's always a bit more of a battle than people like to let on. So again, it's going to go back to what we were talking about before. You need to, well, I mean, you've said it yourself, you're happier and it's better than not drinking than drinking regularly. So again, you just need to find that springboard to get you moving. Sometimes if you're constantly doing day 1s and day 2s, sometimes it's good to set yourself a period in the future and give yourself a week or 2 and build up to it, rather than every morning waking up with a hangover and saying today's my day 1 and then drinking again. And what you do for that week or 2 period is don't go mad, just drink your normal amount, but really analyse it and try not to drink with distractions. So if you normally open a bottle of wine when you get in of the evening, okay, do that, but don't have the TV on, don't sit and chat to your partner, don't put the radio on, don't open a book, just sit on your own and drink, because that can be a real eye-opener, because without all the distractions, you're left with just the effect of the alcohol, and then you can really concentrate on what it does, or more importantly, what it doesn't do. Because don't forget, we tend to drink at the end of the evening when we're relaxing, or when we're eating, or when we're talking to our partner, and it's enjoyable anyway. So the enjoyment that we're actually getting that has nothing to do with the alcohol, we associate with the alcohol. And it can be very powerful, I think, to do that. So try that. Give yourself say, right, I'm going to just drink for a week normally, and then next Friday, Saturday, whatever, that will be my last drink. Don't worry about stopping in between. As I say, don't go mad, but just see if that assists. Because sometimes if you're constantly just doing day ones, it doesn't get you anywhere. To see if there's anything else. I think that's all of them. So there's just one more here I was going to cover off. This is an interesting, because Lynn Johnson, I think this was from previously, but are you an addict if you just like a glass of wine or a gin and tonic and can stop at 2 a couple of days a week? Is this wrong? So are you an addict? Well, I think for the sort of the medical definition of alcohol dependency, no, of course you're not. You're nowhere near that. And for the vast majority of people, a glass of wine or gin and tonic, stopping at 2 and doing that a couple of days a week it's fine. People wouldn't have an issue with it at all. And I think a lot of people who want to stop drinking, that's what they'd be aiming for. Because don't forget, most people, when they have a problem with alcohol, they don't want to stop, they want to continue, but they know they can't continue at the level they're at. So they have this kind of utopia in their mind of, I'll just have 2 or 3 or whatever. So if you can actually do that, then I would say, certainly by society's views, you don't have a problem with alcohol. But I think there's a few points to note there. Everybody starts off drinking 1 or 2, and it gets progressively worse. Okay, so just because you're drinking 1 or 2 at the moment doesn't mean you'll be drinking 1 or 2 in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, whatever. Okay, and secondly, and I've said this many times, approaching alcohol shouldn't be a question of, and this is how society approaches it at the moment, am I dependent on alcohol? If the answer is yes, quit. If the answer is no, carry on. Okay, that's just ridiculous. The only question you need to ask is, am I getting more out of this than I'm putting into it? Okay, am I better off overall drinking or not drinking? Okay, I know I get hungover, but then I enjoy it. What's the net gain or loss? Okay, that's all you need to be looking at. And for me anyway, even if I had the option to going back to having 1 or 2, I wouldn't, because I know that 1 or 2 drinks spoils my sleep. Okay, so I'll be waking up tomorrow. Say if I had a glass of wine now, I wouldn't sleep properly tonight. Instead of waking up feeling fresh and ready to go at the weekend, I'd be feeling tired and grouchy all day. So for me, it's just not worth it. So I wouldn't want those 1 or 2 drinks. Plus, I know for a fact that it wouldn't do anything for me at all other than to make me feel slightly dull. It's not a particularly enjoyable thing. It doesn't taste particularly nice. So why would I want it? So I would say the simple answer is no, I don't think you're an addict. Certainly not physically. You can be mentally addicted, but that's a completely separate point. Is it wrong? That's for you to decide. Are you getting more out of it than you're putting in? And as I say, if you're not, then you stop. But don't forget, when you're looking at the pros and cons, you concentrate very much on the pro as well. If you are having a glass of wine twice a week, is it that enjoyable? Is it worth doing? Is it worth the lack of sleep? And I think, how are we doing? Oh, it's 8:30. That was good. I was just about to run out of questions there. So, maybe one more just to touch on quickly. Drinking out of boredom's an interesting one. Don't forget, drinking makes you bored, because if you're drinking every day, you're not sleeping. It accelerates your heart rate, okay, which makes you want to. Because basically, every human has your heart beats a certain level, and the more it beats, the quicker it goes, the more your body is telling you sit down and stop. Now, because alcohol increases when you're drinking, it increases your heart rate and ruins your sleep. You're sat there the next day not only tired, but your heart rate's up. So your body's telling you slow down, slow down, slow down. So it makes you just feel lethargic all the time. And that is exactly the mental place to be in if you're going to be bored. Because if you're feeling sort of slightly anxious but too tired to do anything, that is boredom personified, isn't it? You're not going to be able to find anything to do because you haven't got the mental or physical energy to do anything. Stopping drinking can make you find more interesting things to do. And people who say, yeah, but I get bored when I don't drink, opening a bottle and drinking it isn't an all-absorbing mental feat. When you've done it the first 500,000 times, you can pretty much do it in your sleep. It doesn't keep you mentally occupied. It's not an interesting thing to do. It just isn't. And yet there's a whole world out there of books, there's shows, there's films, there's people to meet, there's things to do. Honestly, it creates its own world of boredom because you can't be bothered to do anything. And when you've stopped for a bit, you actually start to have the energy to go and do stuff. And I think we're pretty much done then. I think if I've missed anything, I'll try and pick it up on the next one. I'll do one last one. My husband has been really supportive over the past 2 months, but we're going on holiday, and he keeps saying, but you'll have a drink with me on holiday. Don't know how to handle that. Afraid I'll be back to square one. Right, so don't forget it's your body and you decide what goes into it. Okay, that's point number one. And I think point number two, if your relationship's based purely on drinking, then there's probably a bit of a problem there. But I think really the thing to say to it is, but I'll be there with you. I won't be drinking, but I'll still be there with me. It will still be me. I will sit there. You can have your beer or whatever, and I'll have an alcohol-free drink. What's the big deal? Because I think, to be honest, you really don't want to be in a situation where you're feeling like you're being forced to drink for somebody else. I hope that's helpful. Anyway, I think that's pretty much it then. So I hope that was interesting. I'll see if there's any questions I haven't picked up, and if there's any interest, I'll pick them up at the next one. Anyway, so have a good weekend, everyone. Take care, bye.